What if we looked at our sexual health to give us an indication of what's happening with our sleep and our stress? Because the stress piece, again, going back to the hormones, stress has an impact on our sex hormones, right? And the precursors to our sex hormones. Lack of sleep, again, going to that hormonal balance, going to the stress, going to all these factors, going even to detoxification. If we're not sleeping, and oxidative stress from poor diet, lack of physical exercise, all of these things can deplete our sexual interest. Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck, here with you every week. And joining me today is our listener, podcast member, and returning visitor, Deanna. Dee, welcome back.
Oh, thanks, Jen. This is exciting. It's February.
I know. Hard to believe we're like mid-February. It's a thing, right?
Yeah.
So you know this because you've been with us a while. So for anybody listening, if you've been with us a while, you know that I like to do Heart Health Month in February. So in 2022, we had a conversation with Dr. Philip Ovadia called Matters of the Heart and Metabolism, right? Where we connected our heart health to metabolic health.
Yeah, I did love that one.
Yeah. And then in 2021, I called it Takes Heart. And it was sort of like, I describe it as like Heart Health 101 and 201, kind of going through like, what do these words actually mean, right? And how do we make sense of all this stuff? This year, February Heart Health Month, and since this is airing February 15th, right, close to Valentine's Day, I decided that we should talk about the connection between heart health and sexual health.
Sounds interesting.
Right, you're like, okay.
Uh-huh.
Jury's out on this, if you say so.
Okay, Jen.
No, I think you guys are going to like this one. It's really interesting, and I think it goes to remind us how everything is connected in the body, right? But so really quick, before we get into it, let's tell our members what they're getting this week, yes? And you're a member.
Yes.
All right, so this week, your recipe is for antioxidant double chocolate energy bites.
Ooh.
Right? Okay, so they're perfect for this episode because we have the chocolate, right? And there are antioxidants in this recipe, which we'll get to that. It'll all make sense with this episode. You'll understand by the end. I also like this recipe because you can either use dates or prunes, which can support our elimination, right? The not so sexy side of things. Yeah. Delicious as a snack or a dessert. I think you guys are going to love this one.
I'll look forward to Friday.
Yeah. All right. So if you want this recipe in your inbox on Friday, be sure you're a member. You're going to go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries. For $10 a month, you get weekly recipes, a monthly article or tool, extra discounts from me and our partners, plus access to live Q&A sessions. It is a total deal. When you take advantage of the full offerings, you're saving far more than that $10 cost. And I know I say this every time, but it is a no-brainer way to show yourself that your health is a priority. And more than that, being a member supports this podcast and this community. It gives us time to connect. You have a bigger voice in the content of what we share here. So please become a member, support us. I'd love nothing more than to continue doing this with you. So here's what you do. You go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries, or just click the link in the show notes because that's probably easier than remembering the whole URL. Once you're there, you click support now, enter your email and payment method, click subscribe, and you're all set. You'll get this week's recipe for the antioxidant double chocolate energy bites. Yum. I'm ready for a couple right now. I know.
Me too.
All right. So I feel like in talking about heart health as sexual health, maybe we need a little like lay of the land, right? So full disclosure, the concerns between men and women over sexual health are pretty different, right? And we'll get to some of those differences later. But so for men are more concerned about stamina and erectile function. Women are more concerned with desire or interest, right? So we're going to talk about both of those, but some stats. Okay, if you were to guess, what % of adults, both men and women, report being dissatisfied with their sex life?
If I'm going to guess that actually report it?
Yeah.
Okay. 15%.
52.
Oh my.
Yeah. And you're right on like the actual reporting thing because, you know, a lot of people don't, right? It's sort of that thing that nobody talks about, which of course is why we're talking about it.
Right.
But it's interesting, like being sexually inactive is a choice for a lot of individuals. And it could be a source of distress for other people.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So what do you think? All right. Sexual desire declines with people who are, what ages would you guess?
I'm going to say, are men or women or both?
Both.
I'm going to say it declines at 43.
Great guess. Yeah. So like mid 40s and early 60s. In that age range is when that sexual decline occurs a lot. It also happens for people who have at least one child, for people who have cardiovascular health or blood sugar concerns, are overweight or obese. And therein lies a lot of this connection, right, between heart health and sexual health. Because a lot of the symptoms of cardiovascular disease all sort of work together to create this perfect storm of diminished sexual enjoyment.
I'm just kind of curious, like in the mid 40s, because especially women, you start into the perimenopause. So your hormones play a little bit of part of that. And
Absolutely.
Your hormones also play a lot of part in your cardiovascular health. So the lack of hormones and then the risk for your cardiovascular disease goes up.
Yes, exactly. Right? When we have challenges with cardiovascular health, we have the big thing that happens is reduced blood flow. Blood flow is absolutely critical to reach our sex organs, right? That is probably there are 3 factors that go into erectile difficulties. Blood flow is one of them. Women also need blood flow for arousal and for lubrication. High blood pressure, diabetes, and depression also interfere with that desire and our response. So it's like all these pieces, it's the perfect storm to see the symptom of lack of desire, lack of satisfaction, and yet we don't connect it. We think it's this separate thing most of the time.
Wow, yeah, I guess I didn't realize that little connection there. It makes sense now, though.
Yeah. So adding insult to injury, right? The medications that are often used to treat cardiovascular disease also blunt our interest in sex. There's some research that says it can cause orgasm difficulties. So, I mean, even our remedies for such things further compound the challenge.
Yeah.
So there was a review of over 100 studies and articles. And basically they concluded that sexual dysfunction was related to the severity of cardiovascular disease. That when they resumed sexual activity, patients with heart disease reported significant difficulty, including a lack of interest in sex, sexual dissatisfaction, and a decrease in the frequency of sexual activity.
I'm just picturing somebody going into the heart doctor saying, I'm having a little heart problem, and then that's going to be their question.
Right.
And wonder if that's the standard set of questions.
I don't think it is, because I think that's part of why we don't connect these things.
Yeah.
I think it could be a question if you're going to a more functional physician.
Right. Yeah, because you go to a sexual doctor men would go to an erectile dysfunction doctor for that issue, but then a cardiologist for the cardio, and then they don't put the two things together.
Interesting.
Interesting.
So let's talk about sex drive for a second, because there's a lot of factors that go into sex drive, right? So the first category is sort of like biological and physical. So what you were talking about before as far as hormones. Let me try English. Hormones. Physically, right? If we have less physical exercise, proper nutrition, right? Our thyroid, adrenal support are critical for sex drive. It's possible, another physical piece is that it's possible that there's been a surgical removal of the uterus or the ovaries for women, right? Poor nutrition, we talked about. Toxic overload. So a sluggish liver is going to inhibit, right, some of these physical things. Premenstrual tension, hormonal birth control. Again, going back to that physical piece of the hormones. Antidepressants, blood pressure medications are all going to contribute, right? Essentially, our sexual health is a function of overall health.
I was just going to say that. I'm like, basically sounds that you just don't feel good, period.
Right.
So you're not going to have any interest in that.
Right. Then we have environmental factors that are going to contribute to sex drive, right? So the environment, going back to the toxins thing, like toxic burden, also our occupation, right? Like, what are we surrounding ourselves with in that environment, right? Do we have the environment in our home or wherever you might be having such activities, right? Then we get into sort of the psychological element of sex drive. So we have, especially for women, self-image is a big piece of sexual desire. Personality, confidence, right? Those all play into it. Sleep, right? Insomnia, anxiety, depression, going to make it more difficult. And the number one thing I think is stress, right? And stress is also a big piece of connecting our cardiovascular health and our sexual health, right? We know that stress is a major cause of cardiovascular disease and sexual desire, not only on the biological side of what's happening with our heart, but on the psychological side of, especially for women who sort of need that emotional connection and sense of relaxation. We'll talk to that in a minute. But the stress piece is major.
That's really major.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, though, Jen, based on all the stuff that you actually have talked about for so long. It's like to try and help people, improve their health. Probably one of the first things that you and I talk about is how's your stress level?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you sleep? How's your sleep? And when people start connecting those two things, the two probably most important things, it's never on the front of their mind. It's there, but it's not on the front of their mind.
And, it's one of those things, too, where sometimes we think our stress is under control, right? We think we're fine, or this week isn't so bad, right?
Right. Yeah.
Or, we think we sleep okay. What if we looked at our sexual health to give us an indication of what's happening with our sleep and our stress? Because the stress piece, again, going back to the hormones, stress has an impact on our sex hormones, right? And the precursors to our sex hormones. Lack of sleep, again, going to that hormonal balance, going to the stress, going to all these factors, going even to detoxification. If we're not sleeping, and oxidative stress from poor diet, lack of physical exercise, all of these things can deplete our sexual interest. And then we end up going, I don't know what's wrong with me, right? There's nothing wrong with you. It's very biochemical. And I think, yes, there's all of these environmental and social factors and all of these things, but it's almost like we don't talk about it like it's this thing in the quiet, and it doesn't need to be. Like, it's very biochemical in so many ways. And like I said, we sort of have, when it's our cardiovascular health and our metabolic health that are challenged, all of those things play a factor into our sexual health. And yet we don't make that connection. We don't look at those factors and we think something's wrong with us.
Right. I just think people don't, it's not something you want to talk about, but you don't have any problem talking about your heart.
Right.
So it'd be a good topic of conversation with some girlfriends.
Yeah. So when we think about cardiovascular health for sexual health, it's really blood flow and metabolic health, right? Managing that stress. I say it all the time. Manage the stress, have the sex.
It's a good stress relief.
Yeah. If we can make it happen, right? Hopefully it doesn't cause more stress, right?
Right.
And again, thinking about the health problems that affect the heart are associated with blood vessels. And it's the same vessels that are in our sexual organs. Blood pressure, cholesterol, blood glucose. If we have insufficient blood flow, we will not be able to have quality sex or even a desire for sex. Physical endurance relies on sufficient blood flow, right? We think about blood flow to the muscles for, physical exercise endurance. We need that as well.
How many times do you think some of this is like overlooked just because it's like you get the standard answer, when you get to be 50 or above, it's like, you're just getting old. And
all the time.
This is just the way it is. This is just what's going to happen. You're getting older, your cholesterol's going up, but that's because you're old, because now you have less blood, all that kind of stuff.
All the time.
We're going to give you a med though for that.
Well, that's just it.
Right.
Because we have these meds for cardiovascular health. And then when we have challenges with sexual health, men tend to get Viagra. Mm-hmm. Women might get a lubricant or some help, in that sector, right, of an approach.
Yeah.
But there isn't much about women with desire. And there's actually a lot that we can do.
Like, what would your big examples of that be?
So we're going to get to that.
Okay.
In a second, really quick before we take a break. Lifestyle factors that interfere with heart health and blood flow, right? So these are things that we want to minimize in order to maximize our sexual health. Alcohol and drug use. Smoking. We're not surprised. Overeating. Lack of exercise. Poor sleep hygiene. And poor stress management. Those are the pieces that are all going to work together that are going to contribute to heart disease and contribute to sexual dissatisfaction. You're processing. I can see it.
I'm absolutely processing because it's just like, goes into what you do and what I do is, if you take care of yourself, like all
right.
of those things eventually they'll fall back into place.
Exactly. We're not doomed.
We are definitely not doomed because those are all things we can change.
Exactly.
If we want to change.
Exactly. And I do think to that point, connecting some of these things to our sexual health might create a greater interest or desire to make some of the changes.
Yeah. The first thing you said, Jen, was alcohol. Mm-hmm. And alcohol, a lot of people I know like to have a drink at the end of the day to calm down or to relax. And then they think that helps them sleep. But in essence, it's actually probably not helping you sleep
Correct.
Any better, probably worse. And so if you continue to do that on a daily to daily basis, obviously your sleep is probably the one that's suffering. And then your stress level goes up.
Exactly. And you can't detoxify and all the things. And it just snowballs from there. But you're exactly right. It's so interesting. I think we talked about this in the episode called Sleep on It, right? But like when we drink alcohol, what do we say? Oh, I passed out.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We don't wake up going, oh, I feel really rested.
Wake up, oh man, I drank way too much last night.
It was great, right?
Yeah.
I feel great. Right?
I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah. So you're exactly right. It's all of these things that we already know. Maybe spoiler alert, nothing here is groundbreaking other than we're drawing lines to connect these things that we typically think of as isolated in the body.
Right. We can make a connect the dot picture.
Yeah. That'll go in the book.
Right. Exactly. Connect the dots.
Exactly. All right. So we're going to go through some more of the specifics for women and for men after a message from our partner for this episode. Good?
Good.
All right. Big thank you to Lumiere de Vie Skincare. Lumiere de Vie was founded by Amber Reidinger McLaughlin in response to her own experience of mere marginal results from countless costly creams. She realized the revitalization of her youthful skin could only occur if she developed products herself. Working closely with beauty scientists, exploring the most advanced ingredients derived from the earth and sea, Amber created Lumiere de Vie, the next generation of skincare. The extensive line of luxury skincare products is designed to address all skin types and concerns, with the highest quality natural ingredients and powerful formulas that help heal, soothe, moisturize, and protect. Lumiere de Vie acts as first aid for the skin. The result is rejuvenated, luminous, beautiful skin. So this time of year, it's finally cold in New York. So, it's been a very mild winter, but we've had a couple super cold days and windy. So a friend of mine said to me the other day, she's like, I feel like my skin is chapped, right? So this is the time of year when it's cold and windy, although always we want to think about hydration, but especially in colder months. So you could do the Lumiere Divi Hydrate 3.0, which is a hyaluronic acid serum. The Lumiere Elixir is amazing. You can mix it with your moisturizer and then put it on. I also just use the elixir by itself, like on my elbows and my feet, and then put socks on and go to bed. The elixir is only $44. So maybe it's time to upgrade your evening moisturizer. So I highly recommend the Intense Rejuvenation Cream. Also, I use that every night, which is $62.50. And of course, all of these prices are before your 10% off and free shipping for being a Salad with a Side of Fries listener. So to get this deal, maybe for yourself or maybe as a gift, Valentine's Day after all, although it's a little late for that, but still, not for yourself, right? So here's what you do. Text the word SKIN, SKIN, to 844-947-4846. You'll receive the link and coupon code right to your phone. Simply text the word SKIN, SKIN, to 844-947-4846 to try Lumiere Divi Skincare and get 10% off plus free shipping. This is a toll-free number. Standard text and data rates may apply. All right, Dee, should we start with women?
Let's start with women.
All right. So what helps us maintain sexual interest and desire? Like we talked about before, managing stress, our health status, sleep, emotional security. And then it goes back to some of those other things too of confidence, right? Which is a little bit of that health status, body image. And so for me, I feel like, with women, maybe it's a different aspect of heart health, right? But now this sounds, I'm like laughing at myself before I even say this because it's like self-love.
Yeah.
Like if we don't feel good in our own skin, it translates then that our sexual interest and sexual desire will be diminished. So what are the things you need to do to feel good in your skin, right? We go back to, we've done a bajillion episodes in terms of having a relationship with your body and the dialogue that we have with our bodies and sleep and stress.
Yeah. Goes along with, like you said, love yourself. And then it's easier to allow yourself to be loved by others. And the mental health stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say, that reminds me, the emotional security piece. It's why, men, and we'll talk about it in a second, but men are much more, the arousal is much more instantaneous and situational. For women, it's not so situation dependent. It's almost like the avalanche has to all be right. It's like the mountain has to all be in place.
Right. We don't understand men. Men don't understand women. So
right. There's that too.
There's that.
So it goes to that, if whether you're in a relationship with a man or a woman, right, there's that piece of the relationship itself that if that's troublesome, if that's, if there's any tension, if there's stress there, right, it's going to show up in the sexual desire and the sexual interest. And so it's sort of like a catch-22 to some degree sometimes, right? So it's important for all the men listening, recognize, right, how important some of these pieces are in the relationship in order to then have the satisfying sexual piece of a relationship.
Right.
Fish might not sound so interesting, but if it means, having sex, maybe it will be, right? But again, point being, sometimes drawing these connections might make it more interesting to do the things that we know are actually going to improve our health.
Yeah.
And for women, for us to take care of ourselves and say, here's what I know I need in order to show up in this relationship.
Yeah, we have to take responsibility for it as well. I mean, both people do, but yeah.
Yeah. And listen,
I think women, we just expect.
Yeah.
We just expect them to know.
Right. And there's a lot of this too, going back to the biological piece of it. It's very chemical. If we're not managing our stress, right? Generally, as we age, right? We said, what was it? Mid-40s to mid-60s, right? Biologically, what's happening in that time is a shift in our hormones. Dramatic one at that. And then especially if we're coming from hormonal birth control.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We end up with all of these elements. So biochemically, it's sort of like alphabet soup and a chemistry experiment to put things into balance there. And then if you add stress and lack of sleep and potentially not feeling good in our own skin, it's like, well, duh, right? And what's interesting too is that a lot of that are also a lot of the contributing factors to heart disease for women.
Yeah.
Like for a lot of, I should do something on this too, but a lot of the signs or symptoms of a heart attack for women look a lot like anxiety, look a lot like stress.
True. They look so different for women than they do for men. And even stroke symptoms. I just heard something on like the stroke symptoms are so different for women than they are for men.
Yeah. So I think there's a piece of this for all of us to walk away with is, again, it's not necessarily groundbreaking. There's nothing really new other than that we're connecting all of these pieces to the sexual health side of it. And it's not so different. We need the blood flow for the lubrication. We need the blood flow to the organ itself for sensation. And desire or interest is going to come from all these other factors too.
It's chemical.
Yeah. Just like our metabolism, right? I say it all the time. You know, it's not a moral failing that you sometimes feel like you can't stop eating, right? Most people don't know that there are hormones that tell us when we're hungry and when we're satisfied. So it's very biochemical here too. I think we just have, again, a misunderstanding about how we shift that or what causes that.
I agree. What a great topic.
Thanks.
Yeah, what a great topic.
All right, let's talk about the men's side. So men, it's sort of interesting. Okay, so there's so much more. I know we're not shocked. There's so much more on this side of the equation in the research for men, because I think most often, going back to what you were saying before about what's socially acceptable, right? It's become socially acceptable for men to have this conversation with their doctor and to get a prescription.
Right.
So what's interesting too, a lot of times men are concerned about testosterone, right? It's like I hear a lot about testosterone and human growth hormone as we age. Truthfully though, less than 10% of sexual health concerns are truly related to testosterone. I know. I saw your face.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Greater than 70% of complaints are instead associated with cardiovascular and blood sugar health.
Yeah.
Right? Men aging, it increases, right? Typically, men have an increase in fat relative to muscle mass. And then, yes, this does impact testosterone. So therefore, testosterone might be a bigger player in this. But the truth is, cardiovascular health, blood sugar health, hormone production, and bioavailability are what change the sexual function. Also improve urologic health and energy and mood. So if we get these other things in place, it all follows.
Well, so I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, if for, the increase of the fat and the loss of the muscle, that's an aging issue as well.
Yes.
With sarcopenia, it's just not as obvious on some men as it is on women.
Yes.
Yeah. This aging stuff, I'm telling you.
Right. Well, we go back to, what did I do? The longevity equation episode, where it's about aging well, right? It's not about not aging. It's about aging well. And of course, our metabolic health is critical for all of that. So many signs of male androgen loss go by without much attention and are considered just a natural part of aging. So what we want to do is say, okay, we could accept it, or we could say we're interested in aging well. And that means looking at some of these things, because I think we sort of overlook them and then sort of compound the issues by overlooking them. Because we think it's just a natural piece of aging. We're not necessarily doing something about it, but there is a lot that we can do.
Kind of goes with the saying is it's very common, but just because it's common, it's not necessarily normal.
Exactly. All right. So for a man to maintain hardness, okay, 3 things have to be there: blood supply, nerve supply, and nitric oxide. Okay, so blood flow allows for blood and oxygen to be transported to all areas of the body, right? It supplies the blood needed for an erection, right? It's blood flow that really creates that, plus the nerves. So we have to stimulate muscular contraction or relaxation. Our nerves do that. The nerves are going to determine the degree of hardness. There's a really interesting book written by, his name is escaping me in this moment. It's called The Hardness Factor. And he talks a lot about the importance of antioxidants in blood flow and nerve function and nitric oxide, actually, right? Because so the third thing is nitric oxide. So L-arginine is an amino acid that the body uses to make nitric oxide. We also know that naturally occurring nitrates create nitric oxide. And this allows for the penis to fill with blood, creating the thickness of an erection. So with all of these things, antioxidants are critical. Blood flow is critical. So all of the other things that we do that are diminishing these pieces, whether from poor nutrition, poor metabolic health, poor cardiovascular health, again, it's that perfect storm of having issues.
So if you don't have the right blood flow, then you don't have the right nerve flow. And then the nitrous oxide, can you be lacking just one of those? Can you be lacking the nitrous oxide and not have any problems?
So the nitric oxide, you might have some challenge, right? You might say I'm trying to think of how somebody might experience it. It probably is like, it's hard, but it's not the same as it was.
Okay.
Right? Because the nitric oxide is also about the blood filling the penis. So it's sort of, if there's a piece of, like the research connects the nitric oxide to thickness also of an erection. So you might notice some things versus others. Maybe you're noticing, that there's a lack of stamina in there, or like it doesn't last, or it could be, right? So I think it's not an all or nothing. Obviously hard for me to say because I don't have a penis, but,
Right.
But here's why this is so common and why there is so much research. 40% of men over the age of 18 are carrying extra weight.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Get all the dudes to start listening to Salad with a Side of Fries. Right?
No kidding.
All right. 51% of men over the age of 20 have hypertension, according to CDC data. And this is also data from a few years ago. So I can only imagine which direction it's gone.
Ooh.
Going back to the things that we were talking about before, men are 1.5 times more likely compared to women to turn to alcohol for stress reduction, and 2.5 times more likely to end up with alcohol abuse disorder. So again, it's all of these pieces that we already talked about are going to contribute to these challenges. 33% of men reported moderate to severe erectile dysfunction, with 6% saying it began in their 40s.
Okay, can I just say, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the other side of that coin, which is why I think there's so much more research on the men's side for a lot of reasons, but also for men, the sexual desire doesn't decline as much as the sexual drive does. So for men, I can imagine it's this sort of push and pull in their minds, right? Which is different than for women. It's much more that the two are sort of going together, right? On top of the fact that there's just hands down less research on women's bodies, All right, so targets for sexual health: nutrition, detoxification. We go back to the alcohol, the smoking, managing weight, blood pressure, physical exercise and activity. And that's sort of universal, right? The way that sort of plays into it all for women and men are a little bit different mechanisms, but it's really for all of us. I can see the wheels turning. Yeah.
Well, it is, because it's just like, I just keep thinking in my head, I'm like, happy heart, happy body, right?
Yes.
Everywhere.
Yes. Everything that we do, right? So our metabolic health is connected to our cardiovascular health and is connected to our hormone factors too. Like all of it is together.
Right. We need the flow chart for the blood flow.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Also, for men, by the way, this is also the same stuff that's going to support prostate health, like maintaining lean body mass, right? That's also going to impact our sexual health, getting enough protein, our macronutrients and our micronutrients, B vitamins, vitamin D, omega-3s. And like I keep going back to the antioxidants because the antioxidants are blood flow, the antioxidants are nitric oxide, the antioxidants are nerve function, all of these pieces. And your B vitamins are a lot of nerve function also. Vitamin D is a precursor to a variety of hormones. Men and women can easily become iron and B12 deficient, right? Stress eats up our B vitamins. And what's interesting for men, testosterone levels, it's been shown testosterone levels can almost create a kind of anemia. So therefore, you end up with men might actually need iron later in life.
Jenn, with the men that you work with, are they pretty good supplement takers?
They are, because
well, that's good.
I would say it's a mix, right? You end up with a handful who are trepidatious. Like it always makes me laugh because everybody, like we don't think twice about, Viagra and what's the cholesterol one?
Oh,
Lipitor. We're like, give me the Lipitor, give me the Viagra. But when I'm like, we want to take anthocyanidins, these antioxidants, and it's like, wait, hold up. I don't know about that. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a mix, like with everybody. But again, when you connect it to the sexual health, people go, all right, well, let me try.
Yeah. Put it that way. This like we're not talking about your heart. We're talking about the other part of your body you liked happy. So
right.
Yeah.
And there are a ton
get better followers.
Right. Exactly. And there are a ton of herbs and things that we could talk about too. I could probably do another episode just on herbs that support, but like some of them are escaping me in this moment. But like there's a lot that we can do, even, for women too, with some supplementation to support specifically sexual health. But everything that we're also doing for our cardiovascular health and our metabolic health will support the sexual health too.
So you have to put your metabolic health would be once you get that all organized or get that all in
a lot
balance,
of things are going to fall into
and then
place.
Everything falls into balance with your cardiovascular health too.
Yeah. And again, there's always challenges. There's always things changing. We might still see some hormonal imbalance depending on other factors. And the other side of it is we're a constant work in progress, all of us, when it comes to sleep and stress and energy and mood and all of these things. And even what we eat every day, we're a constant work in progress.
Yeah, it can't be perfect.
Right, we can't be perfect. And it's also, we can't not do something today because we did it yesterday and expect everything to just keep going. We do have to continuously show up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Consistent progress. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. All right. I think we did a thing. Heart health is sexual health.
Correct. Happy heart, happy body.
Amen. Right?
Right.
Awesome. All right. Should we do our nutrition nugget?
Ooh, let's do that.
Okay. So this week we're talking about heart rate and heart rate monitors. All right. Again.
Fave.
Yeah. Again, a topic for heart health. And you're a trainer and a health coach, right? So this is right up your alley.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about what heart rate tells us, what we want it to be, and how we can measure it. Cool?
Cool.
All right. What does heart rate tell us? So, okay, heart rate is measured by pulse. So they're essentially the same thing, but they're not, right? It's really that our pulse is how we feel our heart rate. Okay? And it's telling us how many times the heart beats in a minute. Now, the heart, thank goodness, is controlled by our autonomic nervous system, which means that it's involuntary. We don't have to think about it. Blessings, right?
Big blessing.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that the heart rate is really based on what we're doing and what's happening around us. So think physical activity, right? While we're working out, what we're doing, working out versus like sitting on the couch. And then what's happening around us. So think about like if you're excited or nervous or surprised, right? Or like, terror. I was thinking of like a haunted house, or like if you watch a scary movie, right? Those are all going to create changes in the heart rate. So what's interesting though is that our heart rate can be an indicator of not just heart health, but overall health. So we'll come back to that in a second. What do we want our heart rate to be? So interesting, resting heart rate depends on our age and our overall health, and of course, our cardiovascular health. So younger people tend to have a higher heart rate. And these are like resting heart rate ranges. Just, like a toddler is going to be like 98 to 140 beats per minute compared to like a teenager that might be like 60 to 100 beats per minute. Adults tend to be like 60 to 100 beats per minute. And by the way, that's also like during the day while we're awake. During sleep, it's generally lower. So as we age, right, our resting heart rate gets lower. P.S. a newborn would be like up to 4 weeks. Their heart rate could be 100 to 205 beats per minute. You're nodding. You know these numbers.
I know. It's the coolest thing to just listen to.
Yeah. But it's interesting. Like, don't freak out, right? If you have a baby and you're like, oh my God. Don't freak out. It's very natural. And then, do you ever watch any of the doctor shows?
No.
Okay. So, admittedly, Grey's Anatomy, ER, like I watched all of the doctor TV shows. If you ever heard, and like on those shows, they use the words like tachycardic or bradycardic. Oh, right? All right, you're now going to be the smartest person in the room next time you watch a doctor show. Okay?
There we go.
Tachycardia is a resting heart rate over 100 beats per minute. Bradycardia is a resting heart rate under 60 beats per minute. Now, a couple caveats to that, because runners or athletes tend to have a resting heart rate that could naturally be under 60 beats per minute, which makes the argument for like knowing your normal. What's typical for you so that you can note changes. And if you end up in a situation, you know what I mean? Like you can let the physician know this is typical for me. And I mean, so I've had the experience where my resting heart rate, especially before COVID, my resting heart rate was in the 50s. And so sometimes I'll feel like really winded or, like I'll really feel my heart beating if it's at like 130, where somebody else might not feel that till their heart rate is at 170.
Right.
So again, I think knowing what's typical for you becomes really important. And that actually brings us to target heart rate, because I think this is a question that comes up all the time. So target heart rate is the ideal range during activity or exercise. So moderate intensity exercise is where they look at your target heart rate. And this is really about saying, like, I'm working hard enough to use my heart as a muscle, but not so hard that I'm going to create problems for my heart either, right? Very strenuous activity might get you up to like 95% of your max heart rate, but I wouldn't do that all the time. I wouldn't do that very often.
No, or stay there for very long.
Yes. All right, so how do we calculate it? You want to walk us through it? Do you remember?
Yeah, the standard is 220 minus your age, multiplied times, if you want to stay in the 70 percentile, it takes 0.7.
Exactly.
Or 0.85. So that's the standard if you want to put quotation marks around it.
Yeah. And
a lot of things to consider.
Right. And the other side of that, right? So considering your typical, considering what kind of shape you're in, what is your muscle mass, what's your body fat percentage, like this target heart rate thing sort of reminds me a little bit of BMI, where it's really just based on your age, and BMI is just based on height and weight, like not any further information. So use it for what you will, right? As sort of that benchmark, not necessarily the be all end all.
Yeah. It depends on drugs too. I mean, you might be on a drug and it's like, I don't know where my heart rate's supposed to be because I'm on this or that.
Exactly.
Always a good question if your doctor puts you on anything heart-related drug.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
All right, so another interesting piece of heart rate is heart rate recovery. So this is essentially how long does it take for your heart to come back to your resting heart rate following a stimulus. And typically that stimulus is exercise. So when you do this with your doctor, they might do one of those exercise stress tests, right? In my head, I picture the person running on the treadmill connected with all these like wires, you know?
Yeah.
You don't actually need all that. Like you could do it yourself. So here's what you would do. You're going to look at your peak heart rate during exercise, which is typically, depending on what you're doing, but it's typically the end of your workout before your cool down. It might be, you know, the most intense portion if that's not towards the end. Look at that. And then you look at what your heart rate is about a minute after that. And then you can also look again 5 minutes later. So then you do the math of subtracting the peak heart rate from the heart rate after a minute. That difference in beats per minute is your heart rate recovery. So the fast phase of heart rate recovery is typically that first like 30 to 60 seconds. And then the slow phase is anywhere like 2 to 5 minutes after. So typically when people talk about heart rate recovery, they're talking about fast phase, so that first 30 to 60 seconds. In general, people say, you know, you want your heart rate recovery to be about 18 beats or higher, but there really isn't an ideal number. It's more about, we want it to come down, right? We want it to come down quickly. That shows our heart's ability to adapt. But if it comes down too quickly, right, you might pass out, that kind of a thing. So there's sort of that middle ground, which is why we're really looking at like in 30 seconds, in a minute, in 5 minutes. What's the difference in our heart rate? I think what counts as good heart rate recovery, also just like we were saying with your target heart rate, depends on a lot of factors, not just your age, but if you have cardiovascular disease, if you're on medications, the exercise method you're doing, right? What you're doing during your quote unquote rest, right? And then how long you're resting before you're checking that heart rate. Do you have anything to add on this?
No, I mean, I was just going to ask you, is like, do you wear a heart rate monitor when you work out? Or do you use your Apple Watch, or what do you do?
So I use my Apple
anything?
Watch. Before the Apple Watch, I did a heart rate monitor that was one of the ones where you put the strap like around your ribs and you had to like get the thing wet and put the thing on, and then it connected to a watch. I think these days, the Apple Watches, the Fitbits and whatever have come so far that they're pretty good. I don't know that you're going to get that dramatically different of a reading between those two kinds of monitors.
You're laugh. I wear them both, Jen. I do wear a strap.
Okay, so because you're like me. So would you notice the difference?
Well, actually, they're very, very close. Very close.
Yeah.
I mean, 1 or 2 beats off, which is great. I think it's awesome because I kept trying to figure out how in the world that worked with the watch, because it's not where you would normally think that your heart rate was.
Right. And we talked about that in our episode with Ted Kritsonis about wearable devices, that it's actually using like a light through your skin to look at what's happening in the vein. But you're right. If we were going to check our own pulse, right, to look at our own heart rate, we're going to do the back of the wrist, the neck, right? Even the back of your knee can work too. And doctors have some other ways too, right? They have not just a stethoscope, but even like parts of your feet and whatever. Like doctors have other ways. I sort of skipped ahead to talk about those monitors. It really doesn't matter what you're using as long as you stay consistent with the device you're using so that you're comparing apples to apples. And just like we talked about in that episode with all the wearables, we want to look at it as a relative for ourselves versus living by that absolute number, right? Are we consistently higher? Are we consistently lower? Are we able to get our heart pumping like, you know, and bring it back down in a reasonable amount of time? And looking at those numbers for ourselves day to day, workout to workout, rather than, you know, this is my heart rate.
Yeah, it's not ever set in stone.
Yeah.
What I have found interesting with what I did a little, not really a experiment, but when you like say, you know that you had maybe, because I don't drink a whole lot, but maybe a few too many drinks and just did not eat well. And then you work out the next day and boy, oh boy, my heart rate, it was completely off and completely different. And my workout was twice as hard.
Yeah. But it gives you that insight to know what's happening for you versus like sending you running to the doctor. Right?
Yeah. Well, and then I could use that with my clients too. As I said, we talk about nutrition and how important it is. And I even showed it to them. I go, and this is mine on my horrible nutrition for a couple of days. And this is what happened to mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's what our heart rate can tell us, right? So even starting back with that heart rate recovery, right? We want it to come down pretty quickly. The quicker it drops, the better in those, first couple seconds, 30 to 60 seconds. If it takes longer to return to its resting pace, its normal pace, it could be a sign of problems. So essentially what it's showing us is how well our heart is working, and it can predict future heart issues. So it is an important number to measure. So heart rate recovery allows us to check our heart function, determines our mortality risk, and it allows us to also see how certain treatments are working. If you are on some treatments, an abnormal heart rate recovery, again, could be a sign of autonomic nervous system issues, could be inkling into coronary artery disease, diabetes, heart failure, hypertension, right? Essentially, abnormal heart rate recovery makes a person more likely to die from heart disease. Not to freak you out, right?
Oof.
But it's an easy number for us to look at. In general, with heart rate, we want to look further and work with healthcare providers, right? Your resting heart rate, that's maybe some, indicators that we want to dig into it further. If your resting heart rate is typically in the extremes of pretty high or pretty low, right? Consistently. If your heart rate skips or is irregular. Now, this is not to be confused with heart rate variability, which means that the time between beats changes. That's a good thing. But skipping a beat or irregular heartbeat is a reason to go to our doctor. If when you go to check your pulse, you feel more of like a vibrating sensation rather than a single, like a pulse or a thump, you want to go to your doctor. That's called thrill, by the way. Could be a sign of some heart and circulatory issues. And then again, if you have heart palpitations, right? Reason to talk to our doctor. You'll probably know that without taking your pulse, by the way, right? So we talked about measuring it. There's all sorts of ways, but long and the short of it, right? Your heart rate is one of the simplest and easiest ways for you to keep tabs on your own health. And it's a simple way for our healthcare providers to actually catch health problems early or diagnose problems before they grow into something that they might see on other tests. More importantly, understanding your own heart rate, especially your target heart rate and your resting heart rate, is critical so that we can exercise smarter, not just harder, and be our own best health advocate. Deanna, anything else?
No, but if you see something or feel something that you don't feel like is normal, get it checked. Don't be afraid to get it checked.
Absolutely. And I'm guilty of it. I'm the first one to ignore things. Don't ignore
Don't
things.
ignore it. Don't ignore it. Yeah.
Well, as always, everybody, I'm your host. Connect with me on Instagram or really all social media. I'm at Jenn Trepeck, JennTrepeck. Website is asaladwithasideofries.com. Wherever is easy for you, please send a message. I want to hear your key takeaways, your ideas, your questions. What do you want us to talk more about? And these are also the easiest ways to learn more about working with me as your health coach. And if you are not already a member, join our membership program by going to glow.fm/saladwithasideofries. This supports this podcast and this community, but most importantly, it truly supports your health. You'll get this week's recipe for the antioxidant double chocolate energy bites. Deanna, thank you again for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jen.
Absolutely. So until next week, remember that our sexual health is a function of our heart health, and our heart health is about metabolic health and managing stress. So manage the stress, have the sex. Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it, and you are worth it. Happy healthy.